kind of leaving the nest, and then also thinking about how to make sure that you are helping your child kind of put their best foot forward in the college application. There also are a ton of you on here, I know, who have actually been through this process before, maybe even multiple times at this point. And so you know better than anyone that there are many, many options out there for every single student. And given everything going on with COVID this year, as I said, things are going to look pretty different than they have in prior years. And so I know that there's going to be questions around that, both for us in our process and also on the college end of things and how they're dealing with everything. So again, whether this is your first time kind of going through, or whether you've been through this multiple times, hopefully tonight's information will be helpful and kind of just put things in perspective and get some of your questions answered. So I'm going to spend the most time on this first slide because I think it's important to address our philosophy as a guidance department. We do put a lot of focus on the post-secondary process being really student-centered and individualized. And that goes back to what I was saying before, how it's not a cookie cutter approach that every student is going to go on to the same type of path. And so we really encourage students, particularly at this point in their year, to start using the time to kind of do some self-reflecting and some, allowing them to imagine kind of where they see themselves. What goals do they have for themselves? Is there kind of, if they could paint a picture of what their future next few years might look like, trying to help them get that picture in their mind. You may or may not know there's over 4,000 colleges out there just in this country alone. So trying to start to narrow down a list of schools of where to apply can be super overwhelming. And it really requires that the students take some time to do, like I said, some self-reflection and just have some self-awareness and maybe a vision that can help them to decide what path is going to be best for them. As a department, we're also big believers in kind of helping every student to find the right fit in terms of college. And finding a right fit doesn't always equal finding the most selective school that they can get accepted to. We hope that in addition to all the anxiety and kind of worry and stress maybe that comes along with the college application process, that you can also, as a family, but also for your child going through the process, that they can find some of the excitement and the joy that is part of this process. There are many, many great schools out there for any given student. And so, of course, it's also true that the better they perform in high school, the more options and the more opportunities they're going to have. But that being said, I'm sure that you have quickly noticed at home that pushing your own kind of plans on your child, or pushing them to have plans and kind of get their ducks in a row, and encouraging them to really be high achieving and performing academically doesn't always yield that result that you might be hoping for, right? And so part of this really important milestone for your child might also be the first time where they're starting to think about what it is that they see themselves doing in the next couple of years. And so on the next couple of slides, Ms. Martin's going to give an overview of kind of what you can expect in terms of our interactions with your students over the next remainder of this year and moving into the fall.
Perfect. Thank you, Renee. So yeah, we'll just get into some of the nuts and bolts here about what to expect over the next few months with the rest of the junior year. And then we'll talk a little bit about summertime and senior year and basically what's expected of you and what is expected of your students. So this winter time, all the school counselors will be hosting group meetings with our students, and the group meetings are basically designed to present more general information about some of the bullets that are on this slide. So we talk about the timeline for the exploration process and the research process for the post-secondary process, which should be starting this year. Normally, we'd be recommending now to you all that students and families start thinking about scheduling campus visits, which is typically one of the more valuable parts of this process. Obviously, travel isn't advised in the same way right now. However, it still might be possible to visit some local campuses, which we might recommend. And many colleges have made online virtual tours and information sessions much more accessible and available, which is a silver lining to this process from what we've talked about as a department. There might have been some colleges that students had, fantasies and thoughts about visiting before that were never in the cards. Let's say the University of Hawaii. The University of Hawaii has had no other option but to make their campus much more accessible to students all over the world now. So highly recommend to you and your students to take a look at some of the really valuable information that's available on college websites. Our admissions representatives will be touching on that a little bit later. Another topic we'll be talking about in our group meetings is the SAT and the ACT and standardized testing in general, which is a hot topic right now. Again, our admissions reps will talk about this a little bit more in detail, but our main message right now is that with testing being pretty unavailable for many of our students this past fall and potentially going into this spring, we still are recommending students, look into options certainly for taking the test, but we want you to know that many colleges have adapted test optional policies, pretty much across the board. So there were already hundreds and hundreds of colleges that were test optional. That was sort of a trend that we were seeing before the pandemic. And please know now that is a trend that does seem to be continuing. Okay, we'll also be reviewing some of the many online resources that we have available to us, including Naviance, which you may have heard of if you've been through this process before, along with SCORE, which is a tool that our students used, that our juniors used last year as sophomores when they did a 90-minute aptitude test. Okay, a couple more points. We will be encouraging students to start thinking about a junior year teacher who might be a good fit as a recommender. Most colleges require 1, maybe 2 letters of recommendation, and that's something that we want our students to start thinking about, not actually executing just yet. We're not expecting students to ask a teacher, but start thinking about that in the back of their minds. We'll talk about that process a little bit more later. And last, but certainly not least, the college essay. This is one of probably the most important factors during the application process. And I think there's generally a lot of stress around this. Most, if not all of our students will be working on the college essay in their English class this year, but always something that students and parents can be thinking about and actually highlight students there. We want our students to be brainstorming what their essays are going to be about. There's prompts that are available online, and we'll be talking about this in greater detail with them as well. This is probably, I would say, the most time-consuming part of the application process, and counselors are here for support through that process, of course. Okay, again, we'll be discussing that more in depth, certainly in our group meetings, and then following up with our individual meetings. So I neglected to say that earlier. After our group meetings this winter, we'll also be following up with students individually to kind of focus on their more specific and individualized plans. Okay, great. And now moving on to the summer and the senior year overview. So this is basically a timeline that we would recommend most students follow in order to be ready to complete and submit their applications by next fall. So most colleges don't start actually reviewing applications until November at the earliest. And most of our students, our data has shown that most of our students aim to complete their first applications by then. Leading up to that, we recommend that students to continue their exploration process over the summer in order to eventually narrow down a list of colleges that they feel like would be a good fit. Ultimately, we're aiming for students to have a list of colleges that capture what we call reach schools, target schools, and likely schools. And we're here for support. Students are making their list and to provide some feedback on what's realistic, basically, for them. Okay, summertime's also a great time to be continuing to work on college essays and to start working on the actual applications. That could be what's called the Common Application, the Coalition, or college-specific applications. Fall of senior year tends to be a really busy time, and a lot of students feel relieved when they've completed a large chunk of the process over the summertime. So that's definitely a recommendation that we would make. So during senior year, this is when students will actually click the submit button and hear back from colleges with an admissions decision. Students typically have until May 1st to actually decide where they'll enroll and put down a deposit. So that's sort of the timeline for that. Students and families will also be going through the financial aid application process. Renee is going to talk a little bit about this later, and an evening event that we'll be hosting to provide a little bit more information about that for you. But I guess my main point here is for you to know that it's never too early to be thinking about the cost of college, and to certainly be having conversations about how that's going to be financed. This isn't necessarily something that we cover in too much detail in our group meetings, but it is something that we encourage all students and families to be thinking about. Oh, Renee, you're muted, just so you know.
Thank you, Tom. Apparently I can't unmute myself, so that's a fun little feature of Zoom. Thank you so much. So I'm going to go back into talking a little bit more about the individual meetings and what that is going to look like. So Ms. Martin talked about the group meetings and how we'll each be kind of meeting with our juniors in smaller groups to kind of give them an overview of the timeline that Ms. Martin just summarized. But the individual meetings are really where we start to kind of narrow down the specific plans. And again, acknowledging that for each student, the plans are going to look different. These meetings will take place, we hope to get them started pretty soon over the, next month or so. And they'll definitely continue from now until probably the remainder of this year. Some students, seek us out a lot in terms of this process and kind of trying to figure out all of the nuts and bolts of the application process. And other students have had, their plan lined up since they entered the high school. They've been thinking about these things, and people are each at, students are really at different points in the process when it comes time for our individual meetings. So again, reiterating the idea that we really do try to just meet your student where they're at in the process. In the individual meetings, we will talk about their individual plan. That might look like reviewing their course selections for senior year. Of course, if a student has a specific area of interest that they're looking to pursue in college, then taking courses that are relevant to that and also pursuing their interests in their senior year and taking advantage of the fact that maybe for the first time they're trying a more challenging course, maybe at the accelerated level or the AP level. Maybe they're having some more flexibility in their schedule and they're able to choose electives that are more in line with what they're interested in. And so we're looking, to try to help them carefully pick their senior year courses. In addition to that, we really try to encourage the idea of balance, right? Because senior year, just because we offer many AP courses does not necessarily mean that students should go and sign up for many AP courses if the cost benefit is not balanced, right? If it's going to mean that they are just stressed out the entire senior year and that they really have a hard time keeping up with it, then that's obviously not going to be a good plan for them. So we really try to encourage balance, encourage that self-reflection we talked about, and find appropriate courses for their senior year. We also do review what Ms. Martin said with the Naviance and SCORE. So both of these online platforms are amazing resources for students, and all of our juniors have accounts for both platforms, Naviance and SCORE. They both also have all of Needham High School prior application data already loaded into it. So some of you who have been through the process before know that you can do a college search on Naviance, and you can look at all of the prior Needham High School students who were accepted or denied or deferred or waitlisted at all these different schools. And it even gives you specific details about what those students' GPA and testing scores were. So Naviance has so many different ways that it can be helpful. And also we do use Naviance when it comes time in senior year to actually send high school documents like letters of recommendation and transcripts. We do use Naviance as our platform to do that right now. So getting them back onto Naviance, making sure they remember their password that they created way back when, and maybe they don't remember it. SCORE, as Ms. Martin mentioned, we last year had them do this amazing aptitude test, which gives them really just kind of different feedback and information about what their strengths and weaknesses are. It's an aspect that we really loved with SCORE, and we were so excited to introduce it to our students just as another resource and another tool that they can use. Google Classroom is something that a few years ago, thank goodness, we already had moved towards the idea of doing more things online, because right now it's become crucial. We really don't have the kind of FaceTime that we would typically have with our juniors right now. And so in the interest of making sure that information is accessible to as many people as possible, we are getting it out on Google Classroom first and foremost. So if your student is one that you know is not great at checking Google Classroom, or maybe they're getting so inundated at this point with announcements and notifications that they tend to kind of just ignore or look over things, it might be a good thing to remind them to kind of get get back on their counselor's Google Classroom and be checking that on a regular basis, because at this point in the year, we really are using it quite a bit. In addition to that, you can also request as a parent, you can go through their account to be added, probably as you might have done for their classes. You can do that also with the Guidance Google Classroom, so that you also are being notified when we post things, and that way you don't have to go through your child's account. We are also going to be reviewing plans for standardized testing. And like Ms. Martin said, at this point, it's so difficult to even find a place to sit and take a test. We'll talk lots more about that. You'll hear the college side of it. But thinking about, is it even appropriate to try to sign up to take a test? Which test do you take? What's the difference? Should you take the optional essay? The different kinds of questions that students typically ask around standardized testing. So we'll try to make an individual plan with them about that. We'll talk a lot more about finding an individual match, that finding the right fit for a college does not necessarily mean applying to always the most selective college, but rather than that, trying to find schools that actually have all of the things that a student is looking for. We'll talk more specifically about who are the teachers that might be appropriate to ask for letters of recommendation. We'll talk about their extracurriculars, what colleges might be looking for. Often students look at the Common Application and they see 10 spots where they can enter extracurricular activities, and they panic and they think, oh my goodness, I don't have 10 things. I should go sign up for a bunch of different clubs and activities. And that's really not the case. And you'll hear more from the college reps of how they look at extracurriculars. But so we're reviewing that with students as well. We'll make a plan with them for the rest of the spring, as well as how they're spending their time in the summer. And we'll also discuss individual plans that might have something to do with military enlistment. Maybe they're taking a gap year. Maybe they're applying to a theatrical or a music program that requires auditions. Maybe they're looking to get recruited for athletics. And so all of those things sometimes change or add a little bit in the admission and application process. So those are things we're discussing with students in the individual meetings. After that, and throughout the remainder of this year, as I mentioned, we check in regularly. So, we always make it a point to kind of circle back and check in, even if the student doesn't come down on their own, which, like I said, many of them do. Many of them seek us out, and we really encourage that. If you have questions, please keep us posted. Let us know how we can help, just because everyone is at a different point in the process. But we do make it a point that if your child doesn't come see us, we do make it a point to come back and check in with them to say, okay, now that we've made this plan, what steps have we taken? Have you been able to sit for a test? That may or may not be the case. Maybe they signed up for an SAT, but it got canceled on them 5 times. And so they weren't able to actually take the test. Thinking about, have you asked your teacher for a letter of recommendation? Do you need a second letter of recommendation? Are you applying to some schools that require a second one? Have you completed the guidance questionnaire for our letters of rec? Thinking about continuing to kind of chisel away at their list of schools. And again, reiterating that they should be checking Google Classroom on a regular basis, that's where we're posting all of the information that we get, especially things right now having to do with things like virtual college tours that students have, different internship opportunities, timelines, just things that they should be aware of. So Google Classroom, we try to push that as much as possible, that kids are checking that. In addition to tonight, we also in the spring do host a MIFA night. So as you know, getting accepted to college is just one part of the puzzle. The other piece is how to afford paying for college. Many schools have a hefty price tag attached to them. And so how to find a realistic option, and obviously finding a good fit for your family, also includes the financial piece to that. And just because you're looking at a very high sticker price, we call it, just a high tuition rate or a high cost online doesn't necessarily mean that that is the price that you're going to be paying if your child were to enroll at that college. And so in the spring, we don't have the exact date, but you'll be hearing more information about that. We will have a representative from MIFA directly. MIFA stands for Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority. We will have a rep come directly from MIFA. It'll probably be online, I would guess, but typically we have a MIFA night, and it's all geared towards answering your questions about financial aid. Once your kid gets accepted, how do you then afford to pay for college? When is it worth your time to submit a FAFSA, which is a need-based application, if you don't think that you're going to qualify for need-based aid? What other types of aid are there? So there's lots of questions that come along in the process, and MIFA Night is super, super helpful. The representatives that come out and speak are so knowledgeable and so helpful. So I really encourage you to attend if you're able. And again, more information will come out about that in the spring. Right at the beginning of senior year in the fall, we host another night similar to this for parents and families. And our goal for that evening is really to help you walk through the nuts and the bolts of the application process. Now that you know who's writing your letter of recommendation, how do you then get your letter of recommendation, your transcripts, how do you then get that as linked to part of your application and sent to your colleges? And so we go through more of the details, and we also follow up with group meetings and continued individual meetings in the fall with your student as well. So I'm going to pass it back to Ms. Martin, and she can wrap us up and then introduce our college reps.
Perfect. Thank you, Renee. So these are some of our takeaways from tonight, and I hope what you've all heard is that your student's school counselor is here and available for any questions and concerns that you have along the way. That's sort of our biggest takeaway. Other sort of major points that we want to get across to you tonight is that we really believe, after working with hundreds and hundreds of students, that there is a fantastic place and a plan for every student. So we're here to work with students where they're at and meet them where they're at. And it's been so exciting to see more and more students following alternative paths in recent years. So regardless of what your student and what your child is thinking right now, we're here for them to help them, guide them along the way. Like Renee was just saying, we are huge proponents of finding the right fit and not necessarily aiming for the most selective colleges. Of course, we know that the Ivy League schools are very selective and great, and that doesn't necessarily mean that's the right school for you, even if you're accepted. So we're here to provide some advice and some guidance along the way and to help students figure out what is the right fit for them. And it might sound far-fetched, but it really is possible to have some fun with this process. I think it's easy to get caught up in the noise, and this is something we hear every year in Needham, where there's so much chatter, and I think it's sometimes for students and for families and parents as well, it feels like it's all anybody's talking about. But this is a huge opportunity for students to take some ownership in their lives for maybe the first time, and to be thinking about where they're going to live and what they're going to do and how they're going to spend their time, maybe for the first time. So just encourage you to kind of go into it with a positive attitude and an open mind, and to be aware of your own stress and how that might be impacting your student as well. So yeah, those are kind of our major takeaways. Please be in touch with us at any time. This is a really fun part of our job. I think I speak for all of us when I say we really enjoy working with students through the process and figuring out what the right next steps are for each student and each family. So please be in touch with us as questions and concerns come up, and we look forward to working with you all. Okay, and now on to the highlight of our evening. We're so lucky to have these three wonderful admissions representatives joining us tonight. They're going to share some really helpful information with you all and give us a little bit of their perspective. So excited to welcome Gregg Meyer, the Dean of University Admissions at Bridgewater State University. We have Lauren Wilkes, the Associate Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Tufts University, and we have Xiomara Delobato, the Associate Director of Diversity, Recruitment, and Enrollment at University of Massachusetts Amherst.
Right. Well, I think I was asked to at least give a couple of minutes, just a quick welcome, and we'll go down for the three of us to at least introduce ourselves. Thank you for having me. As you can see, my name's Gregg Meyer. I am the Dean of Undergraduate Admissions at Bridgewater State University. I'm so happy to be with you here tonight, although I wish I could be in person, obviously, but we do what we can. So I did want to give you at least three bullets, just some quick things to say about Bridgewater. But the real reason we're here tonight is really to answer your questions and to go over a little bit about the admission process. So I look forward to doing that in a few moments. But I did just want to let you know that if you don't know much about Bridgewater, we are the largest of the state colleges and universities. So aside from the 4 UMass campuses, we're the largest of the state colleges and universities. And in a moment, when we get into your questions, I'll be going over those state standards for the 9 of us. But Bridgewater has about 8,000 full-time undergrads. We're very proud. If you haven't been on our campus in the last about 15 years or so, the Commonwealth has invested about $500 million just on our campus, a little over $500 million on our campus. So if you can get the chance to come down and see us, I really highly recommend it. It's a phenomenal place. And finally, just wanted to mention, we do have 2 brand new majors. So you may know Bridgewater, but these are some brand new things even for us. One is we have started our first engineering program. So other than Mass Maritime, we are now one of the other state colleges and universities offering an engineering program, and that is in photonics and optical engineering. It's a really neat program that we started with MIT. And then also we've expanded our health sciences program, which now includes pre-athletic training, pre-physical therapy, and pre-occupational therapy. So kind of some new things about us. So again, I think that's enough for now. And I look forward to diving into some of your questions. I think I'll turn it over to Lauren to introduce herself.
Yes, hi everybody. So good to connect with all of you this evening. My name is Lauren Wilkes. I use the she, her pronouns, and I am an associate director of undergraduate admissions at Tufts University. Not too far from Needham, right? We're in Medford/Somerville, Massachusetts, right on the town line. And as some of you may or may not know, Tufts is a medium-sized research university that operates like a smaller liberal arts college too, but there's so much more to learn about Tufts than that, just kind of one quick sentence. So if you're interested, of course, I'm happy to connect with any of y'all as you go through the college search process. But at Tufts, my role, I manage a couple of different parts of the United States. Of course, Needham is one of the places that I do manage. So I will be your point person throughout your college experience, unless we decide to change territories wildly next year. But we kind of have counselors assigned throughout the office to help you through your process if you have questions. I also manage some of our daily visit programs, so tours, things like that, obviously the virtual setting nowadays. And I also manage our alumni interview process. So if there are any questions about interviewing for a college, I can maybe help with that as well. But so glad to be here and to connect with all of you.
All right, I think I'm next. Good evening, everyone. I'm just like looking at this attendance and I am so proud of how many parents and guardians are here. That's amazing. So my name is Xiomara Delobato, or CO for short. I'm the Associate Director of Diversity Recruitment and Enrollment at UMass Amherst. And it's a unique title, so a little bit of what my role entails. Other than, being the representative for many different high schools, Needham High School being one of them, I'm the admission counselor that supports all of our counselors, all of you, your students, et cetera, throughout the process. So a lot of what my role entails is being that person that ensures that there's ethical practice within everything that we do at UMass, from where we're traveling, the materials that we're using when we're out on the road, to our presentations, to how we're interfacing with families from all walks of life, right? Because we work with families and students from incredibly diverse backgrounds across the nation, across the globe. So it's really being able to bring in those tools and support systems to our staff, and making sure that they're, on a daily basis being aware of those types of interactions. And it also rolls right into how we review applications, making sure that we're equitable in our review and that we're holistically considering every aspect of a student, and really being able to celebrate and dive into their story. And then, it goes through every point of that phase, or of the cycle of admissions. So that's just in general, a little bit of what I do. I've been in higher ed for closing out on my 10th year, and I love this work mainly because I get to work with all of you. I get to work with your students, and I'm a true believer that education unlocks opportunity at many different levels. And I see myself as a resource for all of our parents and all of our students. And at UMass Amherst, one of the things I'm proud of about our institution, I'm from Western Mass, I'm from Springfield. So this is all of our flagship university. So we are the land grant flagship university of the state of Mass. And I'm proud of that because it allows so much opportunity, literal opportunity for students that join our campus. And not only on the academic side of the house, which I always want to remind students, and I do this often, they're at school, their number one job in school or to go to college, they're going to school, right? Academics is their number one job while they're there, so that they can earn that degree and be great in the world. So I love that UMass Amherst has so many different options for different academic careers, interests, passions, ranging from the fine arts to the liberal arts to the sciences to the business majors, etc. And then not only are we preparing your students to be an expert in their field, in being able to access resources that are quite unlimited for our students, if they want to do research, if they want to study abroad, if they want to, create their own major on campus, stuff like that. We also prepare them to literally be their best self every day. And we have, we really pride ourselves in making sure that we're preparing them for success, as in being able to grow as a good human on our campus, but also being able to utilize these resources to unlock a lot of that leadership, to allow them to thrive. And again, not only be an expert in their academics, but also being able to just thrive and grow as a leader and as a powerhouse within that field as well, because we want them to, be great in the world, whether it's, and they're having that community impact locally, nationally, globally. Our students are doing a number of really amazing things. That is something that we strive for. Like, our ultimate goal is to support our students and their families every step of the way. And while they're at UMass Amherst, setting them up for success so that they could be the best versions of themselves, while they're there, and then when they go off and do great things in the world. So I can talk on and on about that, but that's a little bit about me, UMass. So I think it goes back to Lauren. So take it away.
Yes, happy to. Okay, so one thing I just wanted to go over briefly, as your lovely counselors recommended, it's time to start doing some self-reflection, some research, and you're kind of probably thinking, where do I even begin? And so I think that the college search, that research, that visit can be really, really helpful in helping you understand what you want out of your college experience, what might be a good college match for you. And as your counselors were saying, the virtual world, obviously the traditional college visit was really turned upside down as of a couple of months ago. I manage our kind of daily visits for Tufts, and yep, it looks a complete 180 of what it would typically look like this time of year. So I wanted to kind of give some tips and some insights on how to maybe best navigate what colleges are putting out there at this current time as you start diving into research. First of all, I think that I mean, obviously we're going through a really terrible time, but this is a nice opportunity, at least on the college research side, in that colleges now more than ever across the globe are putting out virtual resources, opportunities, and ways to connect more so than ever before. So yes, that University of Hawaii, you can go on a live virtual tour with them now. You don't have to fly to Hawaii to see all the ins and outs of their campus. Same for Tufts, same for colleges around the globe. So I think that that's really special, and I want you all to lean into that as you're searching. I think the best place to start is obviously the college's websites. And I know that those can be very daunting. There's all these like graphics and videos all popping out at you, and you're just like, whoa, I'm just trying to learn about this school. So I think using Google sometimes is your best friend if you're trying to navigate something specific. I get a lot of questions every day from prospective students that maybe know something that they want to study, like a specific, I want to study English, or I want to study mechanical engineering. Can you tell me more about that major? I don't think I could do it justice more than our website can. If you Google, for example, Tufts mechanical engineering, you go, or any college in that major maybe that you're interested in, you can go right to that department page and see all the ins and outs, the course offerings, the faculty profiles, research opportunities, more. There's so many details in a college website, and it seems daunting. It seems hard to kind of click around and find what you want. So just Google what you want, and that'll usually be the most direct option. In terms of actually visiting a campus, or virtually or in person, connecting with the admissions office itself, the admissions pages of colleges are incredibly useful. You will find simple fact sheets if you're just trying to get the basics about a college: size, location, majors and minors offered, opportunities that you might be thinking are important to your college experience. So you want to make sure college you're looking into has those. Look into those around the website, but also the visit options on the admission site will be very helpful to you too. For example, right now on campus at Tufts, there is basically nothing happening in terms of an admissions visit. We are completely virtual for our visitors. We're asking visitors not to come to campus. So we've offered a ton of different virtual things that typically we wouldn't be able to offer in person, which is pretty cool. So you can see that colleges will have virtual info sessions. They'll have recorded ones, but they might have live ones that incorporate Q&A. So if you have a specific question, you can do that. There's live tours. A lot of campuses will, again, do videos if you don't want to attend something live. But for example, we have current tour guides that would do on-campus tours, doing a live tour with all their stories, all their anecdotes, while going through all our virtual tour. So you can kind of follow along. I know some colleges have even had live tours when they're on like Instagram, walking around campus and showing you the tour, so you can follow along and ask questions along the way. So there's a lot of ways to kind of see a campus without actually stepping foot onto the campus. There's student panels, one-on-one meetings with admissions officers at certain points, really specialized offerings in the virtual world. So you don't even have to leave your living room to be able to really learn a lot of things, a lot of good details about a college you might be interested in. I also think that if you are planning to visit a campus in person, I know that across the US, there are some colleges that have opened to a limited capacity of having on-campus visitors. That's great. Be safe, please. But first and foremost, please follow the guidelines and the restrictions of what that campus is offering. I know, for example, I was talking to a student this fall, and they live across the country, and they're like, yeah, I'm gonna fly over and go to Tufts the next day to visit. And I'm like, whoa, where is your negative test? Like, are you quarantining for 14 days? Like, do you know the mass travel restrictions? So like, obviously, I mean, we know Massachusetts has a lot of restrictions in place right now, but just be smart, be safe. This is a wild time for all of us in campuses. Our number one goal, I think everyone could say this at their college, is we're trying to keep our students safe if they are on campus. And so we're trying to limit visitors. And some colleges are allowing visitors, but maybe in a certain very specialized way. So please don't just like show up onto campus with no research done and not knowing what's allowed and what's not allowed. Like, please, just for the students, for the community, like do that due diligence. But again, some other remote opportunities in terms of visiting. I think my best piece of advice in terms of visiting, learning about a college, connect with students, connect with current students. They are your best resource. They are going to class every day. They are in the clubs and organizations you might want to join sometime. Connect with them. That could be through student chats that the admissions office is offering. It could be, a lot of colleges have a list of students that have offered to be a resource and connect with prospective students. So you can email the admissions office and say, hey, I want to talk to somebody that's studying international relations or something like that. And you can connect with that student, or I want to connect with a student that's from my hometown, and there might be a student in that situation too. You can read blogs that admissions offices have put out, magazines, different publications to kind of get more of that vibe of the campus, rather than just, oh, this is a medium-sized school or a large school, this is the academics they offer. That can kind of help feel out what you feel is a match. Could you see yourself on this campus, even if you're not actually physically stepping foot on this campus? And another thing, that the last bullet point is, in the fall, I mean, typically I'm traveling all over the place every fall. I traveled to my desk in my living room in my apartment all this fall. So we've done virtual visits to different high schools that you can sign up for. Who knows what this fall will look like in terms of what we'll be able to do. But there's always ways to connect with a college you want to learn more about, in probably more ways than you think. I probably didn't even list all of the opportunities many other colleges have. So just keep looking. Things are changing, things are expanding all the time. And if you have questions, admissions, that is what we want to do. We want to help you find the information that you need. So always reach out. I think that's all for me. I think we're moving on to testing now.
All right, cool. Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about testing, and this has been a hot topic for everyone, for all of us, for the entire world, pretty much, on the role of testing in the admission process overall. I would say, something that I know that we'd all agree on is making sure that there's constant research on what institution, so which college or university, what they're requiring for their testing. The good thing, a good outcome that we've experienced is that a lot of institutions have gone test optional, whether it's for a year, for a couple years, et cetera, or more, or just fully test optional completely. Some schools have gone in test optional. To share what that means, it's a student, they have the option to submit their test score or not. So there's no hindrance if they send it or not. And that could be different for many different schools. So it's important to make sure that you are connecting, with the college and university, or that your student is doing that, when they're meeting us out on the road, virtually or hopefully in person later on. But being able to just connect with us and ask, what is our testing policy? That is important because they can vary. At UMass Amherst, for us specifically, we're test optional for the next 3 years. So all of our rising seniors, it's a test optional policy for them, in our rising juniors for next year, which is nice. And what that means for us is that if a student submits their test score, we will use it as a measure to just inform us of a student's, testing. And if a student does not submit their test score, then it doesn't in any way hindrance their admission at all. So that's something that we're proud of. Again, many of our different institutions and peer schools have also gone that route. We have some institutions that are test flexible. So, they will allow test scores. They may use them. They may still require them, but not necessarily use them as heavily in their decision-making process as they have in the past. Some schools are completely test blind, so they don't look at tests at all. Even if a student submits their test score, they will never see that exam. So again, there's a lot of different variations of what we require. And by we, collectively, our colleges and universities. And so my biggest, piece of advice for testing, and just for all of you to know, is to make sure, again, to research the school and look at the admission criteria. Some of the basic, stuff, the basic criteria usually, is common for all of us, like the common core subjects in each of our transcripts, etc. Some of those things are all, we all expect that. But for testing, because it is shifting daily, sometimes, monthly, we don't necessarily know exactly what's going to be going on for next year for some of our schools. And we've had a pretty, this is a frequent question, does testing impact our scholarships or any special programs? Again, sometimes, depending on the school, it may. At UMass Amherst, our merit scholarships are not impacted by test scores at all. Again, they're optional. If they come in, great. We're not using them for merit scholarships, as well as special programs. And I consider those right now competitive programs. So heavy duty competitive programs, let's say, for example, computer science or engineering. Those majors that typically relied heavily on testing and math and science. Because we're test optional, we cannot use those test scores, even if a student submits them, to make that decision. We have to use it solely on the merit of their academics, their 4 years that they've been in school. Because quite frankly, 4 years of schooling for us means a lot more than a year of testing for a student. But again, if a student wants to take it, they've been able to take their exam and they want to submit it, they're more than welcome to, and we'll use it as a point of reference in their academics. The site that you see here, that www.fairtest.org, is actually a really informative website. So there's a lot of different articles, different resources, different fact sheets of past averages of testing and stuff like that. If your student is one that is applying to an institution that is requiring testing. So definitely explore it, because knowledge is power when we're looking at all of these different options. So it has a lot of great options and resources for all of you and students to be exploring. We can go on and on about testing a little bit more, but I do want to make sure we're being mindful of time. So we'll kick it now over to our next topic.
Great, thanks, Zio. I think I am taking over now. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the state colleges and universities, the minimum admission standards. It's interesting. I've been in college admissions a few more years than Zio has. She mentioned it. You can see I'm a lot older, but I think it's in my 36th year now. And when I came to Bridgewater, it was the first time where someone else actually sets our minimum standards compared to, like I said, in past places, it was always our board of trustees or our president or whatever set those standards. But here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we have the state Department of Education that sets our minimum standards for us, actually for the UMass campus as well as the 9 state colleges and university campuses. I feel pretty comfortable to speak for my colleagues at the 9 state colleges and universities. I'll leave UMass out of it. They are probably a little bit more competitive than the rest of us just because they get a lot more applications to their campuses. So they have those minimum standards, but they may not be, again, their standards could be a little bit higher than that. But let me quickly go over what you see here on this screen to explain a little bit what we're doing in the state colleges and universities. Without a doubt, the first thing that's most important to us is what you have taken in high school. So before we start looking at GPA, SATs, extracurricular activities, we're looking at what we call the 17 core courses, okay? Now, lucky for you, at a place like Needham, pretty much those minimum requirements to graduate are tied closely with what those minimum standards are. So you're going to be, it's your 4 years of English, your 3 years of sciences, 4 years of math, and so on. But that's what's most important to us. Then we're going to look at a student's high school GPA. We actually recalculate it. So it might be very similar to what Needham calculates for that GPA, but we're going to recalculate it as my counselors and any of us in the state system are looking at a student's application. We're going to take out those 17 academic core courses and calculate a GPA based on those. on a 4-point scale, but we do give weighted credit for honors courses as well as AP courses. So yes, it is worth your students taking an honors course or an AP course. Honors courses are given an extra half a grade, a half a point, and AP courses a full point. Okay, so we've looked at what a student has taken. Then we look at how well they've done in those courses. We've calculated their GPA. And now that's the main thing that we're looking for when we're considering students. If students have above a 3.0 GPA, they are admissible at all of the state colleges and universities. And I will tell you that we are pretty much in a point now where, again, at the 9 state colleges and universities, if your student has above a 3.0, chances are we will be admitting them. All right. We are looking, we're, as part of the state system, we're looking for ways to admit your students. We're not looking for ways to deny them. We are trying to be accessible, trying to find a way, making sure that our standards are there so that your students are prepared to do well and succeed at the college level. But we're not trying to get competitive, get our name out there to, to as many places as we can, so we get more applications, so then we can deny admission to students. That's not what we're looking to do. We are looking to be accessible. So again, taking the right courses, doing well in those courses is the main indicator if your students will do well at the college level, and we will admit them if that's the case. In the past, part of the state requirements was that a student had to submit an SAT or an ACT score. Starting about 5 years ago, the state gave us the option to become test optional. So a few of us, I think Salem and Bridgewater were the first to go test optional. Bridgewater's been test optional about 4 years now. But now, due to COVID, all of us are test optional. And as Zio mentioned, even the UMass campuses, and moving forward, since we don't know the opportunities for our students to be able to take the SAT, many of us are going to be test optional moving forward. So an SAT is not required. I recommend for students applying to Bridgewater that if they've taken the SAT or the ACT, they go ahead and submit it. Again, as I mentioned, we're looking for ways to admit you. So that SAT or ACT score could help in the process. If it is not going to help, we would then just ignore it. We wouldn't hold it against the student. But the student, as they're playing, they don't really know if it's going to help or not. So I just highly recommend that if they've taken the test, they go ahead and submit it. And again, if it can help the student, we'll use it. If not, we'll ignore it. Now that we're test optional, I will say that students that do not submit SAT scores, that's one less thing to look at in the process, which could be a good thing. But it does also put pressure now on those extracurricular activities, letters of recommendation. I shouldn't say put pressure, but those other things are going to be looked at a little bit more heavily in the admission process now that we do not have that SAT or that ACT score. Okay. The final thing that I'll mention in this process, and again, afterwards, I will put a link in the chat, and I think the school counselors at Needham will make sure they share that so that you can go right to the Department of Higher Education and see these standards are written out, so you have an idea of what we are looking at. But part of this process is they do allow each of the campuses the ability to use their professional judgment, and even if a student doesn't meet that minimum standard, have the opportunity to give students the opportunity to come to our campuses, again, if we see promise, and use that professional judgment to admit those students. So I mentioned earlier that students have above a 3.0, no matter what an SAT score is or extracurricular activities are, they are admissible. Students that are below a 3.0, we are just looking at all of those other parts of their application, their essay, their letters of recommendation, standardized test scores if they sent them, leadership promise, based on those extracurricular activities they submitted, as well as maybe personal interviews that the individual campuses are using. So many of us are using that, what we call that special admit category, as we work individually with your sons or daughters. So just because your student may not have above that 3.0, or if they go to that website and see what's called that sliding scale, where it's below a 3.0, but they have a corresponding SAT or ACT score to be admissible, yes, we will admit them if they meet that standard. But if they don't meet that standard, there's still a good opportunity that if you work with us on our individual campuses, we can give that opportunity to your students. We will not and cannot admit any student that has below a 2.0 high school GPA. Those are the students we are definitely going to recommend go to a community college. The last note I'll say is, that's fine, we can move on, but I do just want to say is, I don't want to make it sound like we are open admission. We again will work with your students to make sure there is a fit. But last year at Bridgewater, we still denied about 1,700 of our applicants. So it's not like we are totally open admission. But again, we will work with your students and to see if it's a fit so that we can offer that admission. Okay, moving on. And I'm not sure who wants to go to start with this topic. I'll turn it over to one of my colleagues.
Lauren, do you want to perhaps go since you started us off last time?
Yeah.
Certainly, happy to. Impact of COVID, where do we even begin? I don't even know where to begin, to be honest. I mean, I think it's safe to say that COVID's impacted all of our lives in multiple different ways, multiple different levels, but it's impacted us all, right? At Tufts, for example, we allowed all of our incoming and returning students to have the option of coming to campus in person, living on campus, living off campus, and attending classes, or to be fully remote. I think the high majority, I forget the exact percentage off the top of my head, but it was in around the mid 80, around 85% of our students did come back to campus, which is why we had to kind of ban visitors. I haven't been on campus in months, really try to limit campus to be for the students and to kind of keep the community safe. Obviously, it looked a lot different than it would have in any other year. We had to, of course, follow Massachusetts guidelines, wear masks. Students were tested twice a week. We had to obviously limit gatherings and kind of readjust basically everything we do. And I know that, our students are awesome and they're excellent troopers through everything, but it was really different. And I think that's kind of across the board. But I think the main priority was that we wanted to keep our students safe and still give them the best education, the best experience we could possible throughout a time like this. In terms of the impact on admissions for us, I mean, I think that we always go into this process trying to, at Tufts and I think at all of our institutions, with a really kind of contextual look at where students are coming from, what issues or challenges within their community or within their school they're grappling with as they're going through the application process. I think I was reading applications all day today before this program this evening, and I think my colleagues and I are approaching the application with a lot more grace. We know that so many of your opportunities extracurricularly and otherwise were canceled or drastically changed. So many things like testing that you might have been really counting on and preparing for have just disintegrated. And so I think just kind of approaching the admissions work with a lot more understanding, a lot more grace, as I said, is a big thing that's happening for us. I don't know if anybody else wants to share.
Yeah, I'll add quickly, is that as we've worked with the Board of Higher Education and again with our admission standards for our students, one of the things that we came out is we started looking at, the fact that more students weren't able to take the SAT this year, and that's why we went test option. Another is that many high schools went to pass-fail grades, as COVID hit. So working with Board of Higher Education, we made sure that we would do no harm was kind of our concept to our students. So we would not allow, the things that they're going through because of COVID to harm them in the application process this year for you. So, if this continues on and COVID continues on and as your students are, applying to college in this coming year, just know that, we are on our end, on the admission side of things, trying not to allow this nasty, crazy thing, COVID, to affect your students in this process. So we are, again, pass fail, we're assuming that the students did fine in those courses and are going to be counting that as meeting that unit and not negatively affecting their GPAs. And again, anything else going on because of COVID, we're making sure we're doing that in the process.
Mm-hmm. I think what I'll add is that, one of the things that, and Lauren kind of said this, we've been really forced to think creatively on how we outreach to our students, because a lot of schools, a lot of colleges and universities, we have like this brick and mortar mentality of recruitment. So we've literally had to think outside of the box. I'm thinking of all my Western Mass students. We have parts of the state that still have no broadband, so what are we doing? Now that we're all virtual, how can we get to them even when everything's virtual? So it's really kicked us it's forced us to shift into a higher gear, and think about how are we being more creative with our marketing content? How can we engage all of our parents, all of our influencers, right? So all the champions that are rallying behind all of our students, to bring you all in the fold of the conversation much earlier, since the process of admissions is just it's very different now. So that being said, it's one thing I personally feel like all students and families should have this expectation now, especially of all of us on the higher ed side, and making sure that we're making the proper moves that we need to in order to make sure that we are accessible for you, whether that's, how we're looking or reviewing applications, how we're engaging, at any point of this process, and how we're offering our support. So that leads me to this thought about, how this is impacting students overall, or what juniors should be thinking next year, since we don't even know what the world's going to look like then. And one of the things I encourage our students to do is, while we're being forced to think outside of the box, I highly encourage and I want students to feel empowered to also think outside of the box, really empower. I want students to feel so empowered that they can tell their story in such a creative way, because at UMass Amherst alone, we receive this year, we're up on applications and mainly because we're test optional. So we're getting tons of applications from students that perhaps would have written us off before because of the testing requirement. So we have over 41,000 applications that we receive in a year. So that being said, we lead in, this was also mentioned before, like using all these other pieces of the application to tell their story, not just GPA, so leadership opportunity, are they working? Are they do family responsibilities? All of these things that make us who we are. And, all are part of, the story of a student. So I would say definitely encourage your students, and if there are any students on right now, like really take advantage of telling your story, feeling empowered, so that we can get to know you even more throughout that process, because, this process is a little bit different and we want to get to know all of our students as much as we can. Words of wisdom.
Well, I can touch on one last point about COVID, because I think I saw in the bullets about, the COVID question on the common application and what do we do with that? And I know that a lot of you were probably wondering that. And who's to say, as you fill out the common app over the summer, like, I don't even know, you might have completely something different to say than you do today. Who knows? Hopefully not. But I think there's a lot of kind of conflicting information about, like, what do you do with that response? Do you write a whole nother essay? Do you share all the different things you've been doing during the time period? Like, how do you use that? And I think, you know, some schools have been weighing in differently. I can say for Tufts, and I think hopefully I can speak in general. Zio, Greg, please, like, correct me if I'm wrong. But I don't think you need to necessarily write that unless there's something that's really contextually important that you need to share that's happened to you in the past several months that may affect how we view your application and what experiences you've had. You have to write enough essays, in my personal opinion, when you apply to college. So if you really are like, I mean, obviously this has been, as I said, difficult for us in many different ways, in many different levels of ways. It's affected us all differently. So if it's significant for you, it's something you need to share. It's something that's important to your application and how we're receiving the information you're giving to us, and it's part of your story. Sure, write it down, but it does not need to be a whole other additional, you know, creatively written essay. It's more so that we just have that context as we're looking at you as an applicant. Okay, now we can do do's and don'ts. Does anybody want to go first?
Yeah, I'll start out with kind of a general concept, I think, and then I'm sure you guys will add to that. But my general concept is, and this is what I try to emphasize whenever I do these panel sessions and talking to, again, over 300 parents, which was phenomenal, as Excel mentioned earlier, is that when I start answering questions to a group like this, is my first comment always has to be, it depends. Okay, so as panelists, we're trying to answer your questions and the things, you know, the do's and the don'ts and the things that you can be considering as you move forward. But we can't answer questions to 300 different parents the same way. And so another way I guess I can put this is to don't assume anything in this process, right? You know, the one good thing about COVID, and it's been brought up a number of times tonight, is we have just enhanced our websites so much. So what is right at Bridgewater may not be the same as it is at UMass, or may not be the same answer as it is at Tufts. And so don't assume, oh, you heard this, or, oh, you know, my friend's daughter got admitted to so-and-so last year. You know, my son is better, you know, academically than her, I'll get admitted, or, you know, or vice versa. Oh, you know, whatever, they got rejected, so I'm not going to apply. Everything is different every year. You need to be reaching out to the individual colleges that you're interested in. We have put so much more content up on our websites, but please know that I hire a bunch of admission counselors to answer your questions. That's what they're there for. They're making decisions, yes, but they're there to reach out, to to go to your high schools to visit, but to answer your questions. So as you put these lists together, it can start with your phenomenal school counselors that you have at Needham, which it should, and they truly are, but then to reach out to us, and we're here for you to answer your question, because it may not be the same as it was last year. As you go into Naviance and see who was admitted last year, and then see where your son or daughter fits on that, you know, scattergram, and they don't fit, that doesn't mean they won't be admitted. It could, gives you an indication, but reach out to us. That's what we're here for. And I'm done.
This is Will Grannon, one of the school counselors, and Xiomara. And Lauren, I don't know if you want to jump in, or maybe we just jump into the question and answer portion of it. Unless you want to say something for a minute or so. Give me your
I can do a quick one.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, I feel like I probably overwhelmed you all in my visit portion of this presentation in terms of like how many different things you can do and so many different ways you can research. So my piece of advice to do is to stay organized. I know this sounds really nerdy, but like fire up that Excel document and take notes as you're researching all the colleges that you're researching, whether it be just a quick visit to the website or an info session. Write down what's sticking out to you, what specific things or professors or opportunities really resonate with you. Many colleges, Tufts included, has a why this college supplemental essay or a Tufts, specific question. Think back to those notes and you could really jog your memory, because you're going to be doing a lot of research. I know it. And if you're like me, you jump around to a million tabs, a million miles a minute, and you forget what you just saw and what college that was attached to. So just stay organized, use that Excel. I know it sounds nerdy, but like it will help you, I promise.
I'd say that in addition to that, that's a really good one. So when you're doing research, a good tip would be selecting a day out of the week that you dedicate to college stuff only. And, we find that, students, the whole admission process is overwhelming. Like, I don't care, like, the situation with the student, every process is for that student is going to be overwhelming and cumbersome. And that's like something that us in higher ed, like, we need to figure out how to streamline all of this and make this just more accessible. But that's a conversation for another day. But in the meantime, with this research, that's inevitable, that has to happen, because this is an investment, right? We have to think about it from that point of view. This is investment in, your students' future. And that investment is connected to whoever's connected to it. So I know it for me, in my family, it was literally a family affair, where like that notion of like the village comes together to support student, it was literally a village coming together to support students. And that village could be, a parent, it could be a guardian, it could be multiple people, also guidance counselors on that team, like whoever it may be. But at home, a good piece, like I mentioned, a good tip is selecting a day out of the week. So let's say it's a Thursday. And on Thursday is the day that you talk college, you talk shop, you talk all of these different things, you research, you write things down, you fill out, write your essay, whatever it is that it may be. It's a day of exploration. And that allows for, our students to kind of disengage and be involved in the rest of everything that they have in life, whatever other life responsibilities they have, their school, extracurriculars, etc., so that everyone in the household is dedicating a focal attention on that same day, or that evening. So I know that that's a piece of advice I've given students and families in the past, and it's worked really, really well to have just that dedicated time every week. And, students just go back to that information when it's time for their college day during the week. So in my last piece, this isn't a tangible one, but it's more intangible. Just, specifically for our parents and guardians in the room, just, continue encouraging your students. It's going to be it might be overwhelming for them. I feel like a lot of students are just our young people are so resilient, and, making sure that you're checking up on them. There are a lot of pressures that, higher education, going to college, like really does, put on students, unfortunately. And I think it is our job to make sure like they don't feel that much pressure, because they're great and they're going to end up going to a school that is a best fit for them, and they're going to thrive, wherever it is that they end up at. So, yeah, I know we want to go to questions, right?
That's right. This is Will Grana, one of the counselors, and we got a lot of great questions, and thank you so much for the info you've all shared so far. What I think I'll do in terms of managing this, I will just call on one of you to answer, so you don't feel like you have to decide who's going to answer a certain question. There's some questions directed to the school counselors, and I'll touch on those real briefly, because a lot of it was about kind of some of the access to some of the resources we have, whether it's Naviance or Google Classroom. And emails should have gone out over the past years about access to those. If you or your child do not have access to Naviance or do not have access to the Google Classroom, please reach out to your counselor. Your child can invite you in for the Google access, the Google Classroom access. Your child received a code to get into Naviance. There's also parent codes that you can reach out to have your own access. You can share access, but the bottom line is, if you want access, reach out. If your child doesn't have access, please reach out, because sometimes emails get put in spam or missed, and we want to make sure that everyone has those resources, starting this year. One other question about the process was about asking for teacher recommendations. We'll get to that, individually and in groups. It's likely going to be an online request process. We're just actually working out the final details of how those requests are made. So let me start. There were a lot of testing questions that still came in. A lot of them were answered. Thank you so much. And I was wondering, maybe Lauren, since you've gone through a fall process of test optional, can you maybe share some of the, I don't know if you have like the statistics of, your early process, what percentage of folks submitted test scores, what percentage of students maybe you admitted who didn't submit test scores, and just a general overview of how that played out for you guys this fall?
Yeah, happy to. Oh man, I wish I could remember that data off the top of my head, but I definitely don't. I remember that it was about half and half. I don't remember the exact of who submitted testing and who didn't. Our admit rates of those who had testing and those who didn't have testing were pretty much, I think, within 1 percentage point the same. And that's just for ED1. So that's not even the full early decision pool for Tufts. So I can't really speak to the final numbers or data yet. I don't think we'll be able to do that for a while. But what I would love to emphasize is, and of course, you all are sitting here and probably worrying, and you're not going to listen to me say this, but don't worry about scheduling that test. You have plenty of other things to worry about right now in life, in just college searching in general. This is just me personally. I was so excited to go test optional. What does a test even tell you? This is just me going on a personal tirade, but honestly, it's 4 hours of your life. That's only going to tell us one thing about you, that 4-hour window. In our academic review, we are so much more reliant on the 3.5+ years you're submitting of your high school transcript, of the classes you've been taking, how you've been doing in those classes, what your teachers and counselors are saying about you. All of that tells us so much more of a greater picture about your academic preparation for Tufts and for college than a single number out of 1,600 or out of 36. Okay, so I just want to be clear about that. So when we went test optional, I was so excited. And I think in how we are seeing testing now that we're optional, it never really was the be all and end all of our process. Again, we were always much more heavily looking at your academic performance throughout high school in the context of your school specifically, what's offered to you, what you're taking advantage of. That's really nuanced. That's how we always have done it. And the testing was also always kind of there for everyone on the side. And now it's not there for everyone on the side. It's there for about half of people. And if it's there, we say, oh, hey, look, there's that test. And if it's not there, I'm not asking, where's their testing? Why didn't they submit it to us? They must have done something bad. Absolutely not. We don't blink an eye when we see no testing anymore. That's the beauty of test optional. It is truly optional. So if you even have the opportunity to test in the SAT or ACT as you move through this college experience and you're applying to a test optional college, if you're like, I don't know if I feel confident about this test, this wasn't a good day for me, this was the only day I could test, a million things went wrong, I just don't, or whatever, I just don't feel confident about this score, don't submit it. It's optional. It's your choice to opt in or opt out to that. But with the numbers I've seen so far, submitting testing does not advantage you. Not submitting testing does not disadvantage you, at Tufts at least. So I think that can be really empowering. We don't have to be just kind of chained to this testing process anymore with these test optional schools that are all, we're test optional for the next 3 years, as is UMass. Bridgewater all has been for the past couple of years. This is empowering. I'm really excited about it because, but I hope you understand, as families, I know you're worrying about it. It's really not that big of a part of our process, and even less so now. So let's cheer for that.
Thanks, Lauren. So we had a specific Bridgewater question, Greg, regarding the relationship with MIT and the engineering program. Can you give us a little bit more information? Is that a co-taught program, or what's that relationship like?
It's actually a grant was given by, and I can't remember the organization that gave the grant, but they were realizing the region, meaning Eastern Massachusetts and specifically Southeastern region, Massachusetts, was lacking undergraduate degrees in this new field of photonics and optical engineering. There was a master's program. MIT had a master's degree in it, but there were some companies here in Eastern Mass looking to develop, which is kind of the technology of the future of microchips rather than actual, silicon and microchips. This is using photons and light as a way to produce the next level of microchips. And so there's a high need for it. And this grant was proposed with MIT, and then we're looking for partners. And because of the strength of our physics and optics programs here at Bridgewater, we tied into this grant with MIT to then develop a undergraduate degree program. And the unbelievable, you can imagine the equipment required for a program like that. And so that's where the funding came from, and this start of this new program. So we are running it. It's not team taught per se. Students come to our campus and are, complete their entire program with us. But we do have some team, research going on between our professors and MIT and actually Stonehill College as well. It's the 3 campuses that are working on this program. And again, I can't remember which of my colleagues, I think it was Lauren, said, I'll tell you as much as I can about a program, but you need to go to our website to really find out about it. I don't have the expertise. But anyway, it's just a really neat program. And we're excited to be offering our first engineering program, undergraduate program here at Bridgewater.
Thanks, Greg. The next one, Xiomara, there's a question, generally you described, I think, the holistic review process. And can you share how that might also apply to the Commonwealth Honors College? Is it a similar review process? Are there different admission standards? Any thoughts on that?
Good question. So that's a common question, especially since we released a lot of our early action decisions. So students are asking us about it. So in general, the admission process, so it's twofold, the process. So first, a student is evaluated within the context of their high school, right? So all Needham High School students are going to be evaluated within that context. For the Commonwealth Honors College, now it goes a level higher. Let's say your student is admitted into biology, right? Every biology student now, so all admitted biology students will now be evaluated within that biology context. So it's not just Needham High School for Honors College. It is every bio student. So it's very competitive, and only about it ranges from 10 to 12%. So about 10 to 12% of students within a specific major, so every major is 10 to 12%, is represented in the Honors College. So that's how we evaluate the Honor College process. If a student was not admitted directly into the Honors College, you can actually appeal in the year. So all of our juniors, if let's say you don't get offered admission next year, or if we have any parents that have seniors in the room, older seniors that, were admitted into UMass already, you can appeal. And that just comes to, since I'm the counselor, it can just come right to me. And then we will review all of our appeals once we finish reviewing our early action applicants and then our regular decision applicants. And once those decisions are out, we'll go to the appeals, and then we'll review again for consideration.
Thank you, Xiomara. There was a question more for the school counselors about how you get started in even a basic questionnaire process when you're kind of clueless, or where do I even start? There are a lot of good tools, the resources like Score and Naviance will also have, search features, but really the search is to ask you questions about things that are important to you or not important to you, related to location, size of a school, what you want to study, all those things. And we'll walk through that in individual meetings as well. But there's a really good starting points with some of these basic searches. And that's really that self-reflection piece that we encourage. And that can really kind of highlight what some initial matches might be. So one other question, maybe Lauren, back to you, would be, do you have recommendations on the best way for an individual to interact with a school? I know talking about the reaching out and searching, what are some good ways to reach out to have conversations either with students or with admissions reps?
That's a good question. I think that outreach can happen after some research has been done on your own. I think maybe I just feel short on time all the time these days, but in the season of when we're having to read applications basically all day, every day, if I receive an email from a student who's basically asking me all these kind of very Googleable, answerable on the website questions for me to answer, I'm like, come on, search for it. But I think that there are so many things that you might have questions about that are super nuanced, or you need a story, or you need a student to kind of help you draw those connections and have those examples. And that's not always going to be found on the website. So I think that we are here for the questions that you cannot find on the website or in your research. We want to be able to help you find that information or make those connections that you need to, but make sure that you can't find that information on your own first before reaching out. I think in general, engaging with the visit opportunities that the school has, that's the best way to connect with a college. I know some schools demonstrate interest, like going to a program like that, going to a visit or a virtual info session, like that's demonstrating interest, but you don't have to do that to demonstrate interest necessarily. I think that you can, and I think it's kind of hard. There's so many specific examples of like when you would need to reach out to me or to one of my colleagues. But sometimes it's just if you need a connection to be made. I know students that have reached out to me saying, I really need to know more about this specific major. And again, as Greg and I have said, like I don't always have all the answers. So I can help you find that faculty member contact or that student contact that has that expertise and is that major, that you can have that really in-depth conversation with them. So I think that's just kind of the gist of it. The things that you can't find on your own, that's when you come to us.
I think I'll just interject there kind of from a dean's level to add to that, is that, yes, we want to see that you're interested in our universities, right? And show that interest, and that can make a difference. But you don't want to annoy us. You don't want to annoy Lauren if she's the one that's going to be, making the decision on your son or daughter. I say that in jest, but it's kind of like checking off another interest level, extracurricular activity in high school, just to say you did it and so that it looks good on your application. You don't want to be doing that, reaching out to colleges just so they know that I'm interested and you can check that off, right? I hope I'm kind of making some sense there. Don't just keep bugging us because you think it's helping you to show interest. Obviously, you want to be coming to our events because you're interested and you have questions that you need answered.
Great. I want to really wrap it up at this moment. We're a little past 8, but I want to thank Gregg, Lauren, Xiomara for sharing your time with us, your wisdom. I want to thank all the families and students for attending. Once again, this has been recorded and will be shared. I know there were a number of other questions, so don't hesitate to reach out to your school counselor. And I think one of the biggest takeaways, I've heard from our 3 representatives tonight and throughout the process, in this very unusual, very difficult, challenging time for all, especially for the students. I feel very, comforted by the fact that the representatives, on the college end are doing their best to take things into consideration, understand circumstances, really do that holistic review. But But if there are specific questions, certainly reach out and ask. But I know and trust that, and I've seen it, that they're doing a great job in that review. So thanks once again for joining us tonight. And thank you, families, for joining us. And we look forward to working with you and your children in this, throughout this process. Good night.
Great.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it. Thank you much.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, Xiomara.
Thank
so much.
you.
Good night.
Good night.
Yes.